Happy Monday, folks. Good morning. May God bless each and every one of you. Welcome to Talking March Madness. I'm Miguel Mike Medina. This is my partner, Avery Jones. Avery, um, we had ourselves quite a weekend of March Madness, some upsets, some early exits that we didn't expect. And the first one that, as a St. John's fan, I did not expect it. They lost to Arkansas, and obviously there's a lot to unpack there, as well as the other games. But as a person who has been following sports for over 25 years, I've learned and have grown to detach myself emotionally when there's a tough loss from about my favorite team. So I quickly get over it. So I'm over it. And besides, it's more March Madness is one game. You lose and you're out. So anyone can be beaten. Doesn't matter if you're the number one or number 16, anyone can be beaten. So, but this is just one of those games where St. John's they just couldn't have nothing going their way. So many missed layups, so many 3-point shots that they missed. But both teams throughout the season, they're poor 3-point shooting teams. But what makes this game so great, in my opinion, Avery, is the physicality. I felt like I saw 90s, or I should say early 2000s basketball with physical play. I don't agree with the flagrant one call on Brazil. Brazil and Zuby, they were chirping, and I love that battle. But I hated that flagrant one call on him. But other than that, even though it was a bad offensive game on both ends, but I like the physicality of it.
I agree with you. It kind of gave that um you said early 2000s. For me, it's almost like the early kind of days of college basketball that you see that physicality, the old Georgetown Hoya rivalry, you know, the days of Michael Jordan when he was at North Carolina. You kind of had some of those flashbacks if you see, 30 for 30 shorts on ESPN, or ESPN is doing documentaries. It kind of had that feel to it. Because both schools have good basketball traditions, St. John's more so than Oklahoma. When you talk about Oklahoma, you mention more of their football team than their basketball team, but we've kind of mentioned in the past couple of years where schools that are more football oriented, their basketball program or any of their other D1 athletic programs are now starting to step up, and we have seen that. And man, I give it to the Sooners. They came physical. I agree. I agree with
Razorbacks.
you too. I don't think there was a reason for a flagrant one. I mean, let the players kind of feel each other out. If it's just talk, it's just talk. Let them figure out how this game is going to go. Let the play decide. Not fouls and whatnot. But it was a good game. I don't think the score dictates, how good the game was. But I think we're just looking at the stepping stone for St. John's, from Coach Patino's first season to now, Big East Championship, number two seed, pretty much like a really 180 turnaround. Well, even from the first season when Coach Patino got in. So I think this is just beginning for St. John's for definitely a few years. For the Oklahoma Sooners, a Sweet 16 bid. Let's see how that runs. But this was one of those interesting games over the weekend where the score doesn't dictate it, but you can tell there was a lot of emotion there for both players, even though, they may not know the history of both coaches. They may know not the history of uh, what to expect from them. But they played a very good game on both sides.
Um, it's the Arkansas Razorbacks. I know you got
Oh, I'm
confused, but
sorry. Where did I get Oklahoma from? I'm sorry,
it's fine. It's
Arkansas.
fine.
But the same still applies. The Arkansas, they're a football dominated, school. I've had the opportunity to visit the school, working with Walmart their year, um uh their celebration meetings are on the Arkansas campus. So you can tell there's a good um foundation there. I don't know where I got Oklahoma from. Forgive me. I'm sorry. Those two are totally different schools. But no, Arkansas, but no, it makes sense. There's something in the University of Arkansas school that's been kind of in a state of flux, whether it be football or basketball. So, like I said, so for Coach Calipari to come in and do wonders with that team, it makes sense. So, yeah, I Razorback fans, I apologize. I know you are two totally different schools.
It's totally fine, Avery. We all make mistakes, but the Razorbacks, I do got to give them credit. They play very good defense on the Red Storm, even though St. John's, they miss a lot of good open looks, a lot of easy layups, but I felt that Arkansas's length was bothering them during this game. RJ Lewis Jr., I mean, he's been talked about for his terrible performance. This is the Big East Player of the Year, and he didn't show up. Of course, we have the whole benching situation. Why Patino had him benched the last few minutes. Um, Kadari Richmond, you needed his leadership. He didn't come through. He spent most of the game on the bench because of foul trouble. So you had those things going on. Zuby, he played his heart out. Give him a lot of credit. Billy Richmond III was the catalyst. He was the star for Arkansas. He led them with 16 points and 9 rebounds. And the Razorbacks, they had 7 block shots. So, like I said, defensively, they did a good job. And I like what John Calipari said after the game, that he told his team coming out of halftime that, make sure that in the first 5 minutes, that St. John's make sure that they call a timeout. If they call a timeout the first 5 minutes of the second half, then you have them. And that's exactly what happened. Like I said, Avery, whether you like him or not, John Calipari knows how to challenge and motivate players. He knows how to bring out the best out of them. He believes in them. And I love watching his interviews because it's just his charisma, the personality that he has.
We
But
said it
and
we
I
said
feel
it before.
and one more thing, Avery. I feel like one of the most important parts of the game was that 7-0 run to end the first half. Go.
Yes. Yeah, and you're correct. We've said it before. When you have coaches that can get their players locked in, when you have coaches that their players, they understand the commitment that the coaches are asking for them, that's when those players show up. And at the same time, if coaches feel that players are not giving, the 200%, more than 100%, then they're gonna get benched. So, that's not a surprise from Coach Pertino. He does have a tendency to bench his players when he thinks they are not doing what they're supposed to do. So, congrats to the Razorbacks on this one. So, again, a Sweet 16 bid. Let's see how it works. But you're right. When it comes to March Madness, one game and that's it. You have one game to move on and help your team's legacy, but there's also that one game that gets you sent home.
Yeah, one thing that caught me by surprise in a way when I saw this game was seeing Spike Lee in attendance. I'm so accustomed of seeing him rooting for the Knicks that seeing him root for St. John's, it caught me by surprise, yes. St. John's is from New York, and they're Queen based on Queens. But it was nice to see that, and I like Spike Lee as a filmmaker. As a filmmaker myself, I like him um for a variety of different reasons. But I just found it in a way so funny to see him there and support the Red Storm because I'm used to seeing him support the Knicks.
Knicks
So,
game. But
so yeah,
Spike Lee is an avid basketball fan. Granted, for
he's a
many
true New
years,
Yorker. He's a true New Yorker.
for many years, we have seen him, courtside of Knicks games, chirping with, NBA player rivals and whatnot. Of course, there's that classic clip
Reggie.
that gets thrown out with Reggie Miller and him chirping. But actually, even though it was a surprise, it really wasn't a surprise. But like you said, as a fellow New Yorker, he's gonna support, those teams, especially if um they're getting more exposure. Usually the exposure for certain, especially college basketball teams, could be just regional. So, having that impact with someone of Spike Lee's caliber to be there to support the team, that's good to see. That's good to see.
All right, moving on to the other games. Well, Arkansas will be playing Texas Tech in Sweet 16. So I'm hoping that Arkansas can make a run there. This is a team that dealt with injuries. They even lost 5 straight games at one point. So I wish them the best. But Tennessee, they beat UCLA 67-58, and they will play against Kentucky, which that's going to be a fascinating
I
matchup.
I had that of the 15 brackets I had, every single one of them had Kentucky and Tennessee because I think that's like old school, down and dirty. That's what that game could turn into. Old school, down and dirty, let, the alumni show up and support their teams because I mean, the fact that that's a Sweet 16 matchup just makes it all the more interesting. That has the caliber of like a Final Four or even a championship game. But that's probably going to be the most interesting game of Sweet 16 play.
Yep, I agree. I agree. Houston defeated Gonzaga. Very, very good matchup. Um, Gonzaga, they had too many turnovers in the first half, but I respect that they rally at the end of the first half. Houston just tortured Gonzaga in second chance points. I love that Kelvin Sampson, he praised Gonzaga at the end of that game. The fact they took the time to do that, that was um um high class from him. But this was a great game. The Cougars defense came up big down the stretch. The Bulldogs, like I said, they put up a good fight. Graham, he led them with 27 points. Gonzaga went perfect, 15-15 from the line. But Houston, their defense, their rebounding, dominating the glass, that's what helped them win the game. So
Yeah,
they're
you
going
pound
to,
yeah, you pound the boards, you're not going to get much if you can't control the rebound.
yeah, Cougars, they won 15 straight. This is their sixth straight 16, Sweet 16 appearance, and they will play against Purdue on Friday.
Ooh, that's that's a sleeper. Of some of the second round games, seeing Houston kind of dominate Gonzaga. Like I said, Gonzaga is this interesting school that they show up every year and they open people's eyes. And now you have Houston, like I said, again, their football team is making, some interesting waves, but now their basketball team is coming back in to prominence. So Purdue needs to be Purdue. Purdue has had a rocky season, but yet when they need to show up, they do. But again, that could be a sleeper game because either that's going to be Houston dominating early and the Boilermakers not catching up, or the Boilermakers keeping pace, but yet they can't go over the hump with Houston.
Yeah, that's a sleeper pick. And Purdue, they absolutely dominated McNeese. BYU Wisconsin game was great. They won
Oh,
91 to
absolutely. Yes.
89. And BYU, they did well in fast break situations. John Tonji, I mean, he had 37 points for Wisconsin. He was dealing, but that great defensive play at BYU in those last few seconds of the game to seal the deal was fantastic. BYU's bench outplayed Wisconsin's bench. That's a big deal. Richie Saunders, he had 25 points and 7 rebounds for BYU. BYU, great performance. They will play against Alabama, which they beat St. Mary's yesterday. And that will be next Thursday at East Region.
Yeah, Alabama, again, like we said, you see these schools, we think football, and then all of a sudden their basketball team is making waves. Same thing. These are two good football schools. Now you have their basketball programs, making some prominence and recognition for their school. BYU, I think, has the best bench depth. I think they have the best bench depth, not just of the tournament, but I think all season they had really good bench depth. When you have players being called upon, they take control and they get the game in hand. So you don't have to worry about overtime, or they just, for lack of a better term, put the dagger in a team. Again, like I said, interesting matchup. You look at it on paper, you're thinking, oh, this is too early to talk about football. No, this is basketball. We're talking about a Sweet 16 matchup with two very good caliber player, with two teams with very good caliber players. So another kind of under the radar game that I think should be watched. Absolutely should be watched.
Texas Tech, they beat Drake. Drake, they ran out of gas in the second half. Auburn defeated Creighton 82 to 70. Auburn, they made big shots in the second half. And Creighton, they won at one point, they went 6 minutes without a field goal in the second half, and that can kill you. Last but not least, for Saturday, Michigan defeated Texas A&M 91 to 79. Wolverines, they were aggressive, driving to the basket in that second half, which was a big deal. Great rally, victory by them. Michigan, I felt like in the last 5 minutes of the game, they took over. So Michigan will go to Sweet 16 against Auburn. Very good matchup to watch.
That's another kind of back in the day Fab Five kind of vibe. But again, like I mentioned with Purdue, which Michigan team is going to show up? Michigan again, great runs through the year, very good season, but still, which team's going to show up? And this is, and you're talking about a number one seed. So, do you want to have that like luxury to say we knocked off a number one? So, the Wolverines need to come in very fierce. They need to be Wolverines against against the Tigers. So yeah. Yeah.
And indeed, and speaking of Fat Five, I've been watching the documentary lately because of March Madness. I'm watching that documentary and the I Hate Christian Laettner documentary. So I'm still not done with both of them, even though I've seen it before. But like nowadays, I gotta take my time with everything to watch because there's just so much going on. So I'm gonna continue watching that today, probably after I get off from this. But yeah, Fab Five, Michigan Fab Five, unbelievable. But Sunday's game, I'm gonna save the best for last, but I'm gonna quickly summarize these other games, and you know where I'm going.
Yes.
So we have Ole Miss. I feel like that was an upset over Iowa State.
Yeah, that's it, it was a legitimate upset. I think it's surprising because Iowa State was number three. But, Ole Miss taking down Iowa State, the Cyclones, again, on paper, Ole Miss, you think we're talking about football, but their basketball team is showing some grit, toughness. They're again, they want to be seen. So what better way? You do a legit upset and you keep on going.
Hmm. Michigan State defeated New Mexico. I gotta give a shout to New Mexico. They start off the
Yeah,
game
the Aztecs.
7-0. They
Yeah,
played their hearts out, but the Spartans bench was huge in this game. Their defense was big time, especially the last 5 minutes of the first half and the beginning of the second half. So that was big time. Jace Richardson didn't even score a basket until that putback at the end, which iced the game. Go ahead, Avery.
you're right. And you kind of mentioned it, before in our original preview of the tournament. Be careful of the Spartans. If your mascot is named after some of the greatest warriors in history, you have to be careful. But I do have to I definitely tip your hat to the Aztecs. I mean, New Mexico wanted to come in for, a really physical battle with Michigan State. And we've said it before in college basketball, if you go any more than, let's say, 3 to 5 minutes without a basket and teams get on these runs, that's kind of it. That's kind of it. And it falls to the wayside at how passionate New Mexico was, but they just couldn't get the ball rolling. No pun intended.
As for your Duke, they didn't even break a sweat. They dismantled Baylor. They're moving on. And that Sweet 16 will be interesting. They will be facing off Arizona, which Arizona, credit to them. That game against Oregon yesterday, they won 87-83. Arizona did not panic. They rallied from 15 points down. This is their second largest comeback of the Tommy Lloyd era. Caleb Love, what can I say about him? Tremendous leader, 29 points. 20 of them came in the second half, including two clutch free throws. So this is the Wildcats' third Sweet 16 in 4 seasons. Duke versus Arizona. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that's a good game. And plus you have two teams that they don't play each other much. Sometimes you get these matchups, but they don't occur until the tournament. So, like, a mutual friend of ours, granted, I've chosen Duke in a good number of my brackets. It is Duke's tournament to lose, really. Just like you're saying, as a fan, we kind of need to we love our teams. We hate when they lose, but we kind of have to be objective in other things. And as a Duke fan, this is it. I have to be reminded that this is not Coach Krzyzewski's team anymore, even though there are still facets of what he has built at that school. I realize that he is not their coach anymore, but there are still the touches that he has passed down to the coaching staff that have been with him for a good number of years. And again, like I said, when you have a good foundation, when you have players that want to go play for the school, play for the coach, to just bring it out, and it's you see greatness there. And again, that's a premier game. Arizona, again, up and down. Duke was very consistent. Occasionally a loss here, a loss there, but Wildcats, Blue Devils, mark it down. Mark it down.
How about that finish of Colorado State and Maryland? Colorado State, they were impressive offensively. They were terrific in the paint. There were so many lead changes in this game. Maryland at one point went on a 9-0 run late in the second half, which was big. Maryland won it with a buzzer beater at the end, barely, just barely, beating Colorado State. Maryland is partying like it's 2002, and
Yes.
but and I give a lot of and I like that Maryland showed Colorado State respect, especially from the head coach after the game. Colorado State, that's a team I'm gonna keep an eye on. I like what I'm seeing from them. So yeah, Maryland, they're moving on and they will play against a team that we're going to talk about very shortly, Florida Gators.
Derek Queen, that is the young man who put up the float away shot. He is etched in NCAA tournament history with that buzzer beater. You know, definitely have to give it up for the Colorado State Rams. Again, there it is, football team making waves that now their basketball team is getting some recognition. And yes, definitely we are going to have to pay attention to Colorado State in the next couple of years. But Maryland escaped one. We figured there would be some like legit upsets as far as like, winning by 7-10, maybe, just the team taking control. But Maryland squeaked by. So yes, they will be playing Florida. And I have questions. I have questions.
And that will lead to this final part of talking March Madness, UConn versus Florida. The very first game of yesterday's game had UConn played like the way they play against the Gators throughout the season, they would have been a much higher seed. They would have been a much higher seed, in my opinion. UConn played great defense. The Gators, they did play sloppy. They they had too many turnovers. They had way too many turnovers in this game. And had UConn taken advantage of getting some of those rebounds and taken advantage of some of those missed free throws from the Gators only made 20 of 32 free throws. We could have had a whole different conversation today. Walter Clayton Jr.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. Walter Clayton Jr. He put that team on his back. He was making some big time NBA shots down the stretch yesterday. So the Gators, although they didn't panic, but they survived. 77 to 75. And this is their first Sweet 16 since 2017. Go, Avery.
Yeah, I have questions. The Florida Gators, if anyone is familiar, with ESPN, they do, their brackets as well. Of the, I think it's about 30 or so analysts for ESPN, I think about 20 or so chose the Gators as a tournament winner, which kind of surprised me. Granted, the more surprise for me was them winning the SEC tournament. So them squeaking by UConn was definitely a surprise because UConn, as a former champion last year, I figured they would still have a very good start, maybe a slow start to the season, but yet they'd get their pickup. But if they seemed like they just could not get a handle during the season, them getting to the tournament, especially in an 8 seed, was kind of, this is probably all you're going to get. So knowing that UConn got as far as they did, yes, it could, yes, we could be talking about a totally different game, but in basketball, it's always kind of these things, rebounds, free throws, turnovers, and Florida was just had some sloppy play, but yes, the, the Gators like squeak by as the now all the number one seeds made it to the Sweet 16. Florida, Houston, Auburn, Duke, correct? So knowing that all the number one seeds made it into the Sweet 16 is something. And of the four, it's interesting that I think Florida is kind of the how did you get here again? It, especially when you look at the game they had with UConn. So the I have questions, and this is not in a downplay of, I'm from Florida. I'm like, we have Gator fans around everywhere, but it does remind me, just like you're saying, certain games kind of remind us of the past in college basketball, which is very good to be had, and this is kind of bringing back, you know early 2000s Gator basketball, which was very prevalent, which rivaled, the football program at the time. So this is an interesting Gators team that I'm paying attention to, but for some reason I'm always surprised at their caliber of play.
Well, the Gators, they're gonna have to pick things up. They have to clean it up going forward because it was not their best, but a win is a win. So Avery, we have the Sweet 16, which we might talk about it either tomorrow or Wednesday. The Sweet 16 begins on Thursday, and it's getting interesting, getting very interesting. The number one seeds, they still move on. They're still there. Um, Sucks that it's mostly the SEC. SEC is really
Yeah,
there, but the Big East is like bye bye.
yeah, it is. A colleague of mine mentioned it. This tournament was SEC heavy. This tournament was SEC heavy, but it was also like which SEC teams were going to go far and which SEC teams were going to show up. So far, a good mix, for what's going to be a good slate of games Thursday and Friday. But there are some surprises in the Sweet 16, but at the same time, it's almost like, I expected this team to be there, or I expected that team to get there. Oh, you showed up, but I'm still kind of surprised. But as I said, I would say of the highlight games, that Kentucky Tennessee matchup is a clear that's a game you got to watch. That's a game like you have to, and I believe that's a Friday night slot. Um, the other one, same thing. Ole Miss, Michigan State. That could be another sleeper. Um, the tournament so far has been interesting that we had kind of our Cinderellas with McNeese and Colorado State. We had what we thought would have been kind of more high power caliber games, Arkansas, St. John's, to be kind of more thrilling, more bombastic, if you will. But it's been a great tournament so far. Like I said, knowing that you have all four number ones in a Sweet 16, because usually around this time you have one of those number one seeds not show up in the second round, and they're packing it going home. So this Sweet 16 is very interesting. You know, Brackets were busted. We're surprised by certain teams. Teams squeaked in like Maryland, with their buzzer beater, but there's a very good batch of games that we have the opportunity to see more from these teams on Thursday and Friday. And it's kind of more like take your pick, you know. So it's it is March Madness. I mean, because I'm it's it's interesting, and not just interesting saying the word, it is interesting.